You're watching The Experience, Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
Hi, everybody. It's Miss Jen here on The Experience. You're watching Talkin Shop. It is a beautiful, beautiful Monday. Plenty of time for you to hear what we have to say and say to yourself, I'm going to contact my local comic shop and tell them what I need to add to my polls so I don't miss it, which is the whole idea behind the show, correct? Just to let you guys have a tease of what you're up for today, as we get to talk to our good friend David Boer. We love talking to so much about his new release from IDW for this week. And then Arnon Shore from Source Point, their new imprint, Magid. He's the editor-in-chief of that imprint, and talk about a book that came out last week, Ben Mortana. And they're both awesome books. I can't wait for you guys to find out about these things and get excited about them like I'm excited about them. See you right after this. Everybody, and welcome back. I am super excited today because I get to talk to a good friend of mine. We don't get to see each other in person hardly ever, but we get to hang out here once a quarter probably. Get to talk about his newest release. He is a very active creator. Let's talk to David Boer.
Miss Jen, how you doing? Every time I come in, I just watch that opening intro and it always just like blows my mind. I love it so much. So
that's all thanks to Kyle, I think, made that one. It could be JD, but one of the producers did. They're super talented. They change them fairly often so that they keep us on our toes, but it makes me feel like I'm doing a real thing instead of a pretend thing.
I was just going to say, I do a lot of podcasts and things, and when you see an intro like that, you're just like, oh my gosh, A game, put on your game face, get in there, do it. You got to perform, man. Got to perform. So.
Mr. Easy-Go-Lucky is already on, and so is Lyle and Ed Weird. We got lots of awesome fans on today, and they probably know what's going on because they've, hit subscribe, so they know what's going on, and they have good friends that told them about our show, so that's why they get to be part of the thing. And they're good people too. So just remember, if you guys have any questions, definitely ask. David's been doing awesome books for a long time. You may be a fan from his work with Boom and all the cool Firefly stuff. But this is kind of like a hard left. I don't know how you got this job. We're going to talk about that. Because
you just walk in those doors and you go, don't you know who I am? And they're like, no. No. Yeah. So folks might recognize me from Kanto. I got a couple of sketches up here behind me. This is my show and tell shelf. I did Kanto, all new Firefly for Boom, and then Killer Queens for Dark Horse, and Rain. I did Rain at Image. I got to work with Joe Hill, who's one of my favorite writers of all time. So that was fun. Yeah. So now this week we are going into the Forgotten Realms because we get to go on an adventure. It is Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning adventures that I am writing. And I'm sure you're going to ask me how this all came about, but I will tell you, when I was an 80s kid, do you know what I loved watching? Dungeons and Dragons Saturday morning cartoon.
Did they exist? I don't think they were. Do they really have D&D cartoons?
What? This podcast is over. I'm just kidding. There was a cartoon in the early 80s that went for like 3 seasons, and it was Dungeons and Dragons, and it stars these characters. And they are a bunch of kids who get on a roller coaster at an amusement park, and they go into this tunnel, and it's a Dungeons and Dragons themed roller coaster in all worlds. They go into the tunnel, and the things start swirling around, and the roller coaster cart under them sort of comes apart, and these 6 kids, or 6 plus one more, I'll tell you about them, There's 7 of them who end up in the Forgotten Realms, and as soon as they hit, they get zapped, and one becomes Presto is the wizard, and Sheila is the thief, and Hank is the ranger, and Eric is the cavalier, and Diana's the acrobat, and then they get a little tiny unicorn named Uni for no reason. She just jumps in, and there she is. And Dungeon Master walks in, and he looks like he's about 3 feet tall with this wrinkly face and long hair. And he says, okay, we're going on an adventure. And that's the conceit of the whole show, is just this group of kids lost in the Forgotten Realms just going on adventures.
I have no idea how I missed this. Was I watching Care Bears or something instead? I don't know.
Gummy Bears, Care Bears. It was during that era of all those great 80s cartoons. And for me, it was part of my universe. And when IDW asked if I wanted to do this, I said, well, D&D, I'm familiar with it. And they said, well, it's based on the cartoon. And I was like, I flipped the table. I was like, you give it to anybody else, I will push people down for this. So yeah, and it's been so much fun. So much fun.
It looks like Ed Weird is a huge fan of that cartoon also.
Yes.
Like and dropping names, like he knows the characters.
Tiamat versus Venger. I love that. So Venger is this guy. And for some design reason, they gave him one horn. His hat has one horn, and the other one is like gone, broken off or something. It was the weirdest choice, but it worked so well.
So please tell me you're going to actually write into this book series an origin story for the missing horn.
So I was on a panel this weekend at WonderCon, and that very same topic came up, and that very same question arose. And I was like, you know what I want to do with it? I want to write like a one-shot, and Venger's attacking. It's like this big elaborate scheme, and the kids are, fighting him, and they finally get out of it. And the whole time he's got 2 horns, right? And it's this whole thing. And they defeat him, and he's sad, and he hangs his head, and he sort of walks away. And on the last page, he trips over a rock, and he falls, and it breaks off. And he just picks it up, and he looks at it, and he hangs his head, and he keeps walking away. So we can hype it up as this is the origin of Venger's one horn, and then it happens in the last page, where it has nothing to do with that. It's just like he trips and falls.
For some mundane reason. Oh, shut up and take my money, see?
Look at that. Yeah. I just think it would be so funny I don't want to gaslight the fans, but I think it'd be so fun. It's such a funny misdirect of like, origin of Venger losing his horn, and it's literally him stumbling and hitting his head after he's defeated.
It would be like a practice in storytelling to like keep that carrot being dangled for the whole entire book. Do you think, right? You're gonna get it. You're gonna get it now. Oh, here it is now. Here it is. Oh no, not now.
Yeah, like Hank has these energy arrows because he's a ranger, so he'll shoot one, and it'll like go and like wing it. And you're like, oh, that's what's gonna happen, but it's just no, just goes right past. I totally could do it.
5 copies already.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna have to convince them somehow. We have to have the origin of the one horn.
Well, you're pretty good at convincing companies to let you have a little more range for their characters. After they see how you handle them, they're usually like, oh, okay, well, just let him do what he wants now.
Yeah, again, you just waltz into those rooms and you just make a total fool of yourself, and they're like, yeah, let's go. Let's do whatever you want. For Dungeons and Dragons, it was interesting because I got to work with Wizards of the Coast and IDW. So it was a little bit, Firefly was more kind of hands-off because the franchise is kind of, there's been so much space between the TV show and the comics that they kind of just let us do what we want. Right. With Dungeons and Dragons, especially with the movie coming out, it was, they were a little bit more focused on, there's some stuff in the cartoon that just is not canon. When they did the cartoon in the 80s, they just wanted to make a fun cartoon. So they were like, I don't think right now that there are classes of thief or cavalier or magician. It's wizard, rogue, and paladin, right? So it's those little things that we had to make sure that accurate in the script, even though we're in the cartoon world. They just want it to be more, I think they just want it to be more unified, especially with the movie coming out, which seems amazing. It seems amazing.
I'm ready to lose my mind. I just saw John Wick, and as part of like the trailer batch that was before it, they played the newest of the D&D trailers, and it is so funny because they play the trailer and then they literally have this like big quote that says it's the most Chris Piney that Chris Pine has been for a long Chris Pine time or something. I was just like, oh my gosh.
You think you've had enough, Chris Pine? Well, introducing Chris Pine in the most Chris Pine role. So you can imagine, stop pining after other movies and other actors. We have Chris Pine.
You need to write all that copy.
I just saw a trailer with potatoes. Do you know this whole thing?
No.
I don't want to spoil it, but Lay's potato chips, I think, is a sponsor. And there's a whole bit in the movie about potatoes. Wait, do you see it? I mean, I haven't seen the movie, but I saw this trailer and I was like, this is what I'm here for. It's like the little bits, the little humor, the little funny. Like I love Guardians of the Galaxy. I love Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, Ghostbusters Afterlife, all of that. They all have that same like fun to them, right? There's heart to them, but they have that some fun. And I think D&D has just, I think they've nailed it. I've seen people say, yeah, people told me that it was good for a D&D movie, and I watched it, and it's just good for a movie.
Right.
That feels good.
So the problem is when you think about D&D is that the fun about D&D usually is that you're doing it as your world. But if you come across another person who's also playing D&D and they start telling you about their campaign, your eyes glaze over because it's not your campaign. It's like, why do I care about that, right? I tell my staff all the time, I'm like, you start telling me about what you're doing in D&D, my eyes are going to glaze over. But in this case, I think they had to have known that. It's like, we don't want to hear about someone else's campaign. We want to see what happens when everything goes wrong.
Right, and that's such a challenge in the D&D world because it's not only your campaign, but also your characters. Mm-hmm. The whole game, the conceit of the entire franchise, the entire game is that there aren't any established, just like Stroud and a couple other like villains, but there's no established heroes. You are the one establishing the hero. So I think with the adaptations into other media, it's a challenge to figure out the characters that people, make it feel like D&D, but also you're just giving the characters over to the audience. I had the pleasure of working with a pre-existing team on Saturday Morning Adventures, which I love my job. I'm just going to say that I love my job because I have a TV in front of me. This is my office. This is my desk where I work. And I have a TV in front of me. And I put on the episodes of the cartoon as background research for writing these scripts. So when I'm writing dialogue, what's that?
So you're living the life.
Oh my God, I can't.
Someone walks in like, what are you doing? You're wasting time watching cartoons. You're like, no, I'm doing work.
I'm watching 80s cartoons and writing funny books. And honestly, if folks don't know, I used to practice law. I'm an attorney, and I practiced for 17 years until I left in 2021 to write movies and TV and funny books. And now I sit at my desk and I watch cartoons and write comics. And for this one, so fun to have I have a moment where I have to have a Presto line. Like, what would Presto say here? And I just kind of look up. I don't copy what they say, but you have their voices in your head. Mm-hmm. And when you have them on the TV, you're like, of course Presto would do this, and he would do this spell, and it would go wrong. That was the big thing with Presto in the cartoon is he has a magic hat. Like he's a wizard, but he has like this hat and he has a green robe. I think he's right here.
Oh, okay.
So he has a magic hat and he can pull stuff out of it, including stuff from our worlds. Like one episode was a ladder, another episode was something else, but it's things that, and he conjures them, but he's not good. So he just tries to do these spells. And I'm just trying to think of one of the spells without spoiling it, but it would just be like nonsense words, like abracadabra, alakazam, come on, magic hat, and give us more time, or something like that.
Oh,
And
perfect. Yeah.
it's just like nonsense stuff, and then the hat always backfires. So he pulls something out, and it's like,
The
give
wrong
us more
thing.
time, and like everybody, like it speeds things up, like it's speeds up the enemies or something like that because it just backfires. So you have to think of original ones, and watching Presto on the cartoon, you're like, okay, so I think this is how he would do this, and then this is how it would go wrong.
I just have to say, since you've mentioned that you were once a lawyer, I would totally be down for a sitcom starring you. It would just be like David Bohr, comic lawyer.
Fancy comic lawyer. Yeah, I don't. Oh, I've tried to write some stories with the law involved, but I just love like horror and sci-fi and fantasy and kids stories and all that stuff so much that every time you inject the law into it, it's like womp womp. It's like taking work home with me. I did one. The one thing I tried to conceive of was something the tagline was "Claw and Order." It's like a lawyer who represents, like a represents like creatures and some like vampires and ghosts and werewolves and all that stuff, but in like a legal system. And so the tagline it's Claw and Order.
I mean, it would work.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of stuff that's out there that I think they have. I mean, I never read the original Lucifer that was part of the Sandman
Oh.
universe, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that Gaiman did not write him as a devil that showed up and helped solve murders with an LA police officer. I'm pretty sure that's not the way that was written. So
Okay,
So that's
okay,
when
hear
you
me out. Manticore, attorney at law.
Manticore Esquire,
Yes.
and it's MANTI space CORP, Manticore.
Whoa, I
Inc.
like it.
And
It's right
it just writes itself.
now.
All right. Got a half
Right,
off. I got to write it.
Earlier, Kyle asked a question that I guess is pertinent because of the recent stuff surrounding the D&D WOTC. Were there any instructions they gave you about how to treat the universe?
Stuff. Since I'm such an 80s kid, all I can think about is the horror movie.
No,
stuff.
They had stepped in and shut down some like open world D&D books, some open source D&D books.
Oh, didn't they change it? Didn't they go back to opening it again?
Right, they did. They undid that. They shut it down. Then they're like, no, you know what? Never mind. We're good.
Yeah.
Plus the movie, plus all Stranger Things. There's more light on WotC and Dungeons and Dragons now than there's ever been. Did they have any specific instructions for you on, hey, this is something we really like. Can you put some accentuation there?
It was kind of, it was even sort of less, it was more general guidance than, it was both more specific and more general. They kind of stepped back as far as the story that we were going to tell and sort of what the quest was going to be and that sort of thing. It was fine as long as we treated it, and IDW is promoting it as like a lost episode of the television show. So, and then we had the very specific notes, which is we would put in a monster and they'd go, well, let's put in this monster. It's a little bit more iconic than this monster. And I have my monster manual right here, by the way. That was fun. That was fun to research all those things. But so it would be more like those specific notes, and it was nothing that have to do with external, because we were working with Wizards of the Coast and IDW. My editor was sort of the liaison between. We could do, whatever Wizards of the Coast wanted to do, we could do it because this is their characters, this is their rights, it's a license. So it wasn't like we had to rely on any open source or anything like that. It sort of was, everything was available to us as long as when it went back to WotC, they were happy with what we were doing.
Oh, here's a question that's going back to our law discussion. How about a revival of Bat and Lash's Wolf and Bird, Counselors of the Macabre?
And the macabre, yeah. I have a copy on my shelf right now. I don't know. I think
What are
maybe
they
my
saying?
own thing.
There's not enough law in comics now, or what?
There's not enough law in comics. Nobody said no one ever, right, Jen?
That's right. There's not. How many gelatinous cubes are in the series? They just want to make you say funny words. Gelatinous cubes.
Gelatinous cubes. So, as somebody who has come into the D&D universe and is now familiar with many of the monsters that are out there and available, the gelatinous cube is just one of my absolute favorites. So I can say there is a non-zero number of gelatinous cubes in this episode, or in this series, without spoiling anything. But also, the way I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you this. We're live, and I hope nobody's recording it. But the way this project sort of evolved from San Diego Comic-Con last year.
Oh.
When I was talking to my editor on Kanto at IDW, and we're chatting, and he was telling me about some of the projects coming along, and this is one of the ones that was brought up. And I was like, you know what? I love gelatinous cubes, and all I want is the one image of a gelatinous cube that's filled with like bones and armor and weapons, and just like gorged itself on adventurers, right? And it's all like floating around in there, suspended. And then at the top it says, if I'm so full, and at the bottom it says, why do I feel so empty?
You made me care about a gelatinous cube.
Really? You care about a gelatinous cube? And that was my whole pitch for Dungeons and Dragons, was just that one image. If I'm so full, why do I feel so empty? And you got your sad gelatinous cube.
Now we just have to give him a name. Sorry, we love you, Steve. It's okay. Just take a
Steve. That's my husband's name is Steve, so I'm going to tell him he's now also a gelatinous cube. That's it.
That's so perfect. All right, do you have any other live books that are going right now that people can also pick up along with adding on this book to their reading list?
Well, you know what I would like everybody to do is pre-order Specs from Boom, because that has ended at 4 issues, but it's out for pre-order in the trade, which comes out in August. That's a fun, well, I'd say fun. None of the horror series I do are like, it's always going to be rip your heart out, rip it out, stomp on it. No, this is a series set in 1987 about two best friends in high school who happened to get a pair of novelty magic glasses from an back of Silver Age comic book, an advertisement, and the glasses were they grant wishes, they find out, and one of the wishes goes terribly awry, and it's a series about the consequences of those wishes, but also really about the relationship between these two boys and how they navigate being outsiders, with these glasses now putting a spotlight on their outsider status in a small town in 1987. So it's like Stranger Things. I picture it as an episode of the Guillermo del Toro. Oh, Cabinet of Curiosities. Oh, yeah. That's what I picture it as. I can picture him walking out and introducing the episode, opening the little door on the cabinet, pulling out a pair of the magic specs, putting them on the table, and then the episode starts.
No, I like the lead-in. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Is there more Firefly inbound?
No, so I wrapped my run on Firefly at 11 issues. Told the story that I wanted to tell, and I'm not sure what the plans are going forward. So I don't know if they've sunsetted, or if there's another plan in place, or if Boom is renewing the license, or what they're doing with that. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely come back, but I did get to tell the story that I wanted to tell, with Jane.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh, and Kyle, for some reason, wants you to talk about hench otters.
What? Hench otters?
Hench otters.
All right. So I wrote this book from Dark Horse, which it's called Killer Queens, and I pitch it as Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's it. That's it. I brought together an all LGBTQ plus creative team to just put together an outrageous sci-fi romp that's like space fun. It's like if you like Futurama, if you like Guardians of the Galaxy, if you like, it's funny. There's some heart to it. It's really day glow, sort of throwback to the 1950s, but with a super forward sensibility. And just we just chewed up the scenery as much as we possibly could on every single page.
Killer Queens was awesome, but anthropomorphized animals are my jam.
Okay.
And so the whole time I'm reading that book, the Henshotters are just Nicolas Cage in anything. Nicolas Cage.
Did you get the trade, Kyle?
I have every issue. I have the trades. I think I bought some from your Whatnot shows, like when you were doing those.
Okay.
Like I've got more covers of that book than anything that isn't a Ninja Turtle.
Oh my God, I love speaking of anthropomorphic characters. Yeah, because at the back of the trade, we did a special like 6-page short that was called Harry the Hench Otter in It's Not Easy Being Mean. And basically the whole shtick of it is he's like a henchman. He's a hench person, but he's an otter and he's so cute and fluffy that it's just very hard to be tough and burly when you're a cute otter.
You're cleaning your hands like this.
The kids are like running up to you and petting you as you're like.
Edward's going to tell you your D&D series, despite the fact he's asking if it's going to be ongoing, mini, or one shot, the correct answer needs to be ongoing.
Okay, Edward. I love that. It's Edward von Blissenstein. It's like I just want to write a comic with that name, a character with that name on it. It's a 4-issue miniseries, and I know that's not the answer that you were hoping for, but I think there's going to be more. It kind of fits the 4-issue format because it's about episodes, right? It's doing episodes to sort of rejuvenate this series from 30 years ago. So I like that format. It's manageable for me. So I'm hopeful that there's going to be more coming down, and really it's going to come. Miss Jen, you know what it comes down to. Orders. So
Dollars.
Money. So I think the pre-orders have done well. So I'm hopeful that we can go back and do this because it's been really fun to write these characters that have been in my head for more than 3 decades now.
Yeah. I think it's cool that they matched someone who actually loved the cartoon.
It was just serendipity because, with Firefly and with Rain, which is kind of it's an adaptation of a Joe Hill story. So it's, technically work for hire that I got to sort of adapt and imagine in a comics format. And for D&D, it's just my MO is just doing things that I love, even licensed characters. It's really nice to be approached by big licenses, but if you're not passionate about the underlying project, that's really, really hard to step into that, to then write those characters and make it feel authentic and fun.
Absolutely. We're out of time. It's crazy, man. That half hour just blew by. For everybody that's watching, where's the right place to follow you on social media to get up-to-date stuff?
Sure, you can follow me on Instagram at David M. Boer. You can follow me on Twitter at David Boer, on Whatnot at David Boer. And I'm on Facebook too, but I don't know how that works. So you just look for my face, I guess.
It does work. I promise.
I don't know the link or something, but yeah, I'm on Facebook too. Mostly I'm on Instagram and Whatnot. So
if the easy answer to that is to find an LCS, or if you're an on live person, find your favorite live show and ask them to order it for you. Very easy because it's out this Wednesday.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to have copies. I also ordered some. You know, they have the action figures that just came out for Saturday morning cartoon. I had no.
I'm just so far behind. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it just happened that they did that. So I ordered some, and I'm gonna sign the little boxes, put them with the comic, and let's get it out there.
If you guys are going to be at MegaCon, is that this weekend?
MegaCon is this weekend. Yeah.
You can catch up with David Brewer there. So you can get him to sign one of your cool books you already have.
Might have some copies of D&D with me.
That'd be perfect. We can bring your haul of all the other books too. All right. Thank you so much, David. This is so awesome. Thank you for being awesome and keeping writing things that I love, love, love.
Well, thank you, and for always reaching out to help me out with this. You know, as you get busier and busier, sometimes it's hard to keep all those dishes in the those balls in the air. But you know, we're all working together. We'll do it. We can do it.
We can make comics awesome always.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, stick around because we have another awesome guest coming up. We're going to be talking to Arnon Shore. We'll see you guys in a second.
There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit comicshoplocator.com to find a store near you.
Do you remember what it was like when you were a little kid and you got a letter in the mail? Now imagine that letter was filled with information about your favorite shows, pop culture questions, links to things you're going to want to see later, and even sneak peeks at upcoming programming here on The Experience. That's what the EXP mailing list is. Every week, we send you sneak peeks, information, and all of the relevant links for all of the shows you want to see. Sign up now on our website or scan the QR code that's on your screen right now.
Welcome back. I'm Miss Jen. I'm here at Space Cadets Collection, but we're here on The Experience. We love it so much. If you guys give hearts and thumbs up so our producing team knows that they're doing an awesome job. They work real hard on all that stuff you see in between shows and make sure this goes off without a hitch. All I do is sit here and talk about cool stuff. And please subscribe and tell your friends about subscribing. We're super happy about that. And make sure you tune into all our shows this week. We're giving away tons of slabs in celebration of us reaching our 1,500th plus subscribers. So we're super happy about that. And also, so I don't forget about it, Comics and Collectibles with Rex and John tonight has got some really cool stuff. I got to see the pictures of it behind the scenes, and there's some awesome books they're going to be putting up. But we're here to talk about new books. So let's talk to our friend Arnon Shore.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
It's so funny. When I saw your name on my list, I was super excited because I actually know another Shore. There's a Jeremy Shore owns a store in Dallas, Texas called Titan Comics.
No kidding. Spelled the same way?
Yep, exactly the same way.
Wow. It's an unusual spelling.
Do you know, is your family like large? Do you have a lot of family that you can trace the name to? Or are you like me? My family name died like before me. So
we have a lot of genealogical information, but the English spelling of my last name was kind of a typo at some point in the 1960s. So most of the Shores that I'm related to, when they spell it in English, spell it Schorr.
Oh, that makes sense.
But the C got dropped at some point, and here we are. But yeah, but on my father's side, we can trace the family back about 1,000 years, which is pretty unusual.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
When did your family end up in America?
It happened a few times. My grandparents.
That's crazy.
Yeah, well, my grandparents came here in the 60s for work when my father was a kid. My father went back to Israel, which is where they had come from. And I was born in Israel. And my parents brought us all here again when I was about a year and a half old. And I've been
Was
here
it
since then.
for Dad's work?
It was for work, and also my grandparents had stayed here. So it was kind of coming to be closer to them. We ended up living one town over, so really close, which was nice.
Peace from the Netherlands. Hey, hello, Aziz. I have so many questions. I looked at all your cool information. I was like, oh, this is gonna be hard to decide on what to talk about. But for the first like 15 minutes here, I want to kind of like delve into the before the comic book stuff. Did you always have this knack for writing? Were you always drawn to do something literary?
Yes, I didn't quite realize it until a little bit later, but even I think when I was in kindergarten, I was drawing pictures that had stories to them. And I didn't call that storytelling. Nobody pointed it out and said, hey, you're telling stories. But that was always kind of there as far back as I can remember. And then elementary school, I would write stories, and to the point where I was, I think, in second grade, and we had to write a bunch of stories and share them with the fourth graders. And there are still people out there in the world who will randomly find me and say, hey, I remember you told a great story when I was in fourth grade and you were in second grade. And I
Really?
no idea what the story was or who they are, but it still happens sometimes. I really liked writing stories and just did it for fun until about the very end of middle school when the film bug really took over. And
Because you saw something, a film that inspired you, or did you
so
just
yeah, I saw Jurassic Park when I was 10. And I mean, it's a wonderful movie. But the thing that did it really is at the end of the movie, that helicopter's flying off into the sunset and it says directed by Steven Spielberg. And I was a kid, I hadn't gone to the movies very often. So when I went, I saw this, it was a big, massive experience for me to see not just a movie, but that movie on the big screen in a very crowded theater. But when that credit came up, I was like, why is that name familiar? Where have I seen that name before? And that's when I started to kind of piece together. You walk around the world, you're surrounded by stuff, and most of the time you don't think about where it came from.
Yeah.
And that was the first moment that I really started to think about where movies came from. And I realized this same person made a whole bunch of movies that I really liked. Wait a minute, people make movies. I'm a people. I can make movies. So that coincided with digging out the camcorder from the closet and starting to point it at stuff and having
start out with a Super 8 or what?
Pardon? It was
You
just
chose Super 8?
past, it was just past the Super 8 era. We were already onto 8mm videotape.
Okay.
And yeah, recruiting siblings and friends to be in stuff. Footage of the model train set up on the floor of the room. I mean, it's very much the sort of lower middle class Massachusetts 80s version of Spielberg's origin story, kind of the same thing, which I didn't know at the time. It was just, that's what I was doing, and made short films through high school and then through college, and started making scrappy little no budget features in college, and kept going. And I'm still doing it, although the comics have taken a bit more of a front seat. I'm still writing screenplays, still trying to get movie projects off the ground. Like your last guest said, spinning a lot of plates.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so in the creation of film, have you been one of those jack of all trades where you just learned all of the different segments about it, the filmography, the sound, lighting, all of those things? Did you put all of those in your tool belt?
Yeah, so starting out in Massachusetts, that was kind of how it had to be, because when you're bitten by the film bug in a place like this, there aren't really people around you who have similar interests. So it's not like you can say, hey, you'll do sound, you'll do camera, you'll do lighting, you'll do, I mean, you can find some actors because there are people who do theater, but for the rest of it, there isn't really, a large pool of people who are passionate and interested in doing it. So I did a lot, starting with the writing. I would write my own scripts, and I never considered myself a writer when I was doing that. I'm not entirely sure why, but I always kind of insisted that no, this isn't writing, this is filmmaking, it's a different thing, even though I wrote the scripts. And there was even a time, there's one short film I did, I was in college or just after college, and I was shooting a walk and talk in Waltham, Massachusetts. So these two characters are walking down the street and having a conversation, and there I was, the camcorder in one hand, microphone in the other, headphone on my ear, script tucked under my arm, walking backwards down the street. That was me. I was the entire production team. And I also did pretty much all of the post-production on most of those.
So you also know how to edit then.
Oh yeah. I've done some editing professionally also in the years since, as a way to, rub a few nickels together. But soup to nuts for a while. The one thing I avoided pretty successfully was acting. I generally did not have to put myself on the other side of the lens, except for one time. And ironically, the first time I won a film award, it was for acting in that short film. So that was weird. But generally, I like to stay kind of behind the scenes as much as possible.
So I read the synopsis of some of your earlier films, but this one I actually feel like I have to track down and watch. Benjamin's Troubles, in which he has jeans that he finds out give him magically $100 bill for every day he wears them, but he cannot take them off or they will stop producing money, which I don't know how he would know that without taking them off. That sounds like the best starting idea for a movie. And then
that's a wonderful one. That one I did not direct. That was my first job in Hollywood.
Oh, was it really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got out to California and was reaching out to, people in my network and trying to figure out how I could get my foot through the door. And there was a guy, now he's a producer, producing feature films all the time, Sasha Yalon. At the time, he was just also fairly new in LA, but kind of a step or two ahead of me. And he said, why don't you come to a production meeting? I've got a little, independent feature film that's trying to get off the ground, and you'll sit down in the production office and meet the people and we'll see what we can do. So I went in thinking, all right, I'm going to be humble about this. I had done all the short films and the stuff back east, but I knew California is a whole different beast. Hollywood is sort of treats the small, scrappy indie stuff very, very differently. So I'd come in humble and say, you know what, I'll just be a fly on the wall. I'll offer to work for free as an assistant to an assistant. I'll bring coffee. I'll do, whatever's helpful, just to kind of get the lay of the land and learn how things are going. By the end of that day, they offered me the job of unit production manager on the film. So this is the person who's kind of in charge of coordinating the entire production, which was very, very scary and challenging because it was a scrappy little independent production. So it's not like you could throw money at a problem to fix it. Right. But it was also a really cool experience. Production was all in downtown Los Angeles. So I would drive in the morning and there would be these lines of New York City police cars because they were filming CSI New York. And I was like, what weird Twilight Zone did I just walk into where NYPD is in Los Angeles? And they were filming a Batman film at the time, which was also, every now and again, a street would be closed and they would be doing all sorts of stuff. So it was a really fun, great way to sort of get immersed in Hollywood. And a lot of the people I worked with on that film ended up doing really well. And now that's become an important sort of core piece of my professional network. But yeah, that was a fun one.
Is that how I've talked to a lot of people about how to get into Hollywood? And it seems like that story, your willingness to show up and not like demand money, but to say, can I be helpful in some way, is the way a lot of people end up having real jobs in Hollywood, is because they're like, that person was trustworthy and did a good job with what we gave them. And now we know who that is. So I have another hole in another production. How about him now?
Yes. my only amendment to that is I think it took me a while to learn this. So, it's a very sort of easy thing to fall into, but there's a temptation to come in and say, don't pay me. It's okay. I want to learn. But there's also a bit of a sense in Hollywood of like, you want to work with people who are good at what they do. And someone who comes to you and says, hey, I'm not even worth money. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you're like, well, if you're not worth money, then why should I trust you with this really big project that I'm working on that's really expensive? I'd rather pay somebody who has some confidence in what they're doing. So when I started asking for more money at a certain point, I started getting better work. So it's a subtle balance to try to strike, especially when you're starting out, but try to limit that amount of time that you're willing to work for free, to volunteer essentially. And before you're ready for it, before you feel comfortable doing it, start asking for more. And Hollywood tends to respond better to that than you'd expect.
So they want people that are sure of themselves.
Yes. Yeah. A little bit of confidence goes a long way.
Oh, that's perfect. Also, I just want to mention for our viewers, just so you can also have like a memory cue to try to remember this moment in your life. The other cool things about you that I learned that I thought were super impressive is that you remember Mensa. And
how did you find that out?
It's totally on your LinkedIn bio. And
LinkedIn,
that you know how to make coffee, that you're a barista. So
yes, I was a Starbucks barista for 3 years. I did the coffee master program. And yeah, I'm a little bit of a friendly neighborhood coffee snob. Friendly in that you can have your coffee however you want to have your coffee. I'm not gonna force you to drink something you don't like. But if I'm drinking coffee, it better be good. The funny story that I love about that, I took the job because we moved to Maryland after college. I met my wife in college. She took a look at my career prospects and decided to become a doctor. So she went to medical school in Maryland, and I needed a job. And, it was just the start of the 2008 recession, and there wasn't all that much going on, certainly not in media or film or any of that sort of thing. So somehow I stumbled into a Starbucks job, even though I was not a coffee drinker at all. My father's a big coffee drinker. He really wanted me to be a big coffee drinker, but I never really got into it. Part of the Starbucks training is they do these coffee tastings where you have a little bit of coffee and you're supposed to describe how it smells and describe how it tastes. It's very much like a wine tasting. Yep. And through that, I got to kind of train my palate. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, coffee isn't just this dark, vile, bitter substance that you drink for the caffeine. There's a whole range of flavors and textures and possibilities with coffee. So I blame Starbucks. That's what got me kind of deep into this coffee thing.
You know what's so funny about that is I've also trained as a barista. The thing that I thought was super ironic is that when you are smelling perfume or cologne to decide on a smell for yourself, they have these things of coffee sitting around as a palate cleanser. You're supposed to smell coffee. So I'm like, what do you do to cleanse your palate if you're tasting coffee?
Well, it was the food, really, what you ate between the things. That's what kind of, it didn't fully reset it, but it kind of shifted things around a little bit and gave you a different option.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's talk about this cool book. I read it last week and did a review for it.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, Ben Mortar is really good. I described this, and you can tell me, you can correct me as much as you like about it, but I felt like it was, when they say for music, if you like this, you'll like that. I said that it was for people that really liked the Indiana Jones adventure, searching for treasure and finding mystical objects crowd.
Yes, absolutely. Those are such fun stories, and there are surprisingly few of them. I mean, if you think about Indiana Jones, like what else is in that, that category, in recent years, especially. So it felt like, well, let me contribute to that genre a little bit.
I was super proud of you for finding another historical / biblical object that he could hunt.
There are more. There are many, many more. It just, you have to dig a little deeper into the folklore, and in particular into some of the sort of nooks and crannies of Jewish folklore. There's all sorts of great stuff. And that intersects in interesting ways with Muslim folklore, which also has some great stuff. And so you kind of, if you get away from the stuff that people have already talked about, which is mostly stuff that's connected to kind of Christian folklore traditions,
More Judeo-Christian, yeah.
And dig around in some of these other kind of very related histories and cultures. I mean, Christianity and Islam and Judaism share a lot of core text, so a lot of core characters, but the folklore traditions diverge in interesting ways. So what you don't find in one, you might find in another. And I really I am a religious Jewish person, and I love kind of rooting around in Jewish history and folklore and culture and tradition, and finding these little nuggets that haven't really made it onto the screen or onto the page, and finding ways to make them contemporary, to make them fun, to tie them into some sort of contemporary genre, and then share them with the world.
There's so much good material there. I will just tell you, part of my background is I'm also a Sunday school teacher, so I take study of all scripture very seriously. So I love things that address it, because it's just like this. It's such rich material. It's amazing to me that there's not more stuff, books, movies, and stuff that even tried to do a correct job of research. I don't know. There's never been an accurate angel presented on screen, and
oh well, that's a whole range of, I mean, because you say accurate angel, but what version, what tradition are you looking at? How literal or spiritual, metaphorical, there's so much room to play.
So
and yeah, that's my first comic book, which is, I mean, Ben Mortar is my first floppy, which is very exciting to me, to start kind of going into this world. But before that, I wrote, thank you. Before that, I wrote a graphic novel called Jose and the Pirate Captain Toledano. And this one is actually based on, or an expansion of, a story I first told in a short film. So it's kind of unusual. Like, usually you hear about comics getting adapted for the screen. This one went the other way. And it's a story about Jewish pirates in the 16th century Caribbean. Refugees from the Spanish Inquisition who fled Spain and Portugal, who took to the high seas in order to escape, to survive, and who took to piracy, both as a means of survival and as a way to strike back against Spain. And it's this sliver of history, of Jewish history, of Caribbean history of the Americas, that nobody talks about, and that just has remained obscure.
Did you find source material for like a specific pirate that this one's based on, or did you just kind of like take the lore of general piracy from that time?
So there is one book on the subject with a terrible title. It's called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. It's really a zany title, but a fascinating book that sort of covers, it talks about the broad history, describes a bunch of the characters through about 150, 200 years of the history. And some of those characters I found particularly inspirational, but the characters in the book are fictional. So they are inspired by the history and the characters and all that. But I crafted a story that's entirely fictitious in that setting. But it's another example of like taking a piece of this, Jewish heritage, an obscure piece, something that people don't necessarily know about, and turning it into something fun and exciting. In this case, a swashbuckling, pirate story.
So what is next under the McGee banner?
So McGee is a very exciting new thing. It's a new imprint at SourcePoint Press, focused on telling Jewish stories. So stories that feature Judaism or Jewish characters in a positive or central light. And what's next? We are currently working on a couple of floppy series. The first one that actually began its development before I joined the company is this one here, Partisan 42 by Rami Dubrow and Carrie Miles. This is the ash can that they put out.
Does that have a golem on the front cover?
Pardon?
Does it have a golem on the front cover?
That sure is. Well done. Yeah. So Partisan 42 is a monster story set in the forests of Europe in 1942 during the Second World War. The heroes are Jewish partisans who have fled the concentration camps and are using their family's ancient traditions of being able to create and summon these monsters, a golem in particular, to fight the Nazis, but the Nazis have monsters of their own. So issue 1 is in progress right now, and we haven't quite figured out the release timetable for it yet, but at some point, hopefully before the end of this year, we'll start rolling those out. It's going to be a 4-issue series. Another one that we're working on now, also issue 1 actually is done. We're working on issue 2, The Adventures of Levi Marcus. He's the Jewish gunslinging nephew of Wyatt Earp. This one's a Western set in 1880s San Francisco, written by Dave McLeese. And also, the whole idea is let's tell a Jewish story with Jewish characters and Jewish themes, but let's break out of the molds that we've become so used to. Let's not do the sort of angsty secular New Yorker story or the opaque Hasidic type story.
Right. Exactly.
Let's do something else. And that's the kind of projects. Those are the kinds of projects that we're developing and the kinds of stories that we're hoping to tell. That's where we are.
Is the pirate one you showed first, is that also through Source Point or available for
No, this is how they found me. This is through a publisher called Carben Publishing. This might be too much glare for you to see. Carben, their primary focus is Jewish children's books. But they've started to expand into middle grade graphic novels, and they're trying to kind of tap into this new growing interest in graphic novels in the mainstream kind of book marketplace. So Josh Edelglass, the illustrator, he and I cut a deal with them to release that book. That landed me on a panel at Comic-Con in San Diego this past July to speak about Jews in comics. And that was where I met Josh Werner from Source Point, and I was introduced to them. They were putting this new imprint together with Rami Dubrow and David McLeese. And when they talked to me, they said, you should be part of this. You should be very involved. So since then, I've been helping them launch the imprint. Now I am the imprint's editor-in-chief, and I get to write my stuff. I get to shepherd other people's stuff. It's making stuff up for a living, there's nothing better than that.
Oh my gosh, you live the coolest life. You do all of the fun stuff that we love. For everybody that's watching, this is the book you need to go find. It'll be at your local comic shop. It just came out this last week officially, so you should be able to still find it, or they should be able to order you copies. No problem.
And FOC for issue 2 is tonight, I believe, tonight or tomorrow. Until midnight tonight. Yeah. So issue 2, which is awesome. It takes our adventure to secret chambers in interesting parts of Istanbul. That's the other fun thing. I get to sort of travel all over the world in my imagination when I'm writing this stuff. So yeah, issue 2 in Istanbul. FOC is tonight. So definitely, if you order it now, it'll be hopefully guaranteed in your comic shop if they do things right. And issues 3 and 4 will come out, in the subsequent months. Yeah, I'm excited about this one. It's just such a fun story. And every time I get to share it with people, it just makes me happy.
I know that this first book made me very happy, so I'm going to hunt down the other one because I have a feeling that it's right. I love anything that's like historically based in any kind of way. I am a sucker for such things. So.
We spent a lot of time trying to get the history and the locations right. So the issue 1, you've got much of the story takes place at the Alhambra Palace and Museum in Granada, Spain. And so there was a lot of time studying those Google images and trying to get the architecture correct. But one of my favorite features, in this issue, they're hunting a map, and you can kind of see the map on this page
Yep.
here. And that map, if you look really, really closely at it, there's like writing scrawled on it. It's a map of ancient Istanbul before it was Istanbul, before it was Constantinople. I think before it was Byzantium even. But the map is written in Paleo Hebrew. And so I had to figure out how to label this map in Paleo Hebrew. I wrote it out for the illustrator and sent it to her because she doesn't know Hebrew at all. So like we really wanted to get into the details on this thing and make it as rich a reading experience as possible.
Oh, that's so awesome. We have run out of time.
Oh my gosh.
I do want people to be able to figure out how to learn all the things you're doing and when they're coming out. Where's the right social media place for them to follow you?
Oh, there's a few. So Maggid Comics, if you search Maggid Comics on, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got Twitter. So follow all of those. I am Arnon Shore, spelled ARNONSHORR. And I am also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Arnon Shore on Facebook and Instagram, at Shore on Twitter. And ArnonShore.com also. Easy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate your
thank
time.
you.
It's lovely getting to know you. I'll be definitely following your work. Everybody stick around on the experience because coming up next is going to be some awesome stuff. You know you love John and Rex, and you want to stick around for the Rex Cap. See you guys next time. Bye.